back in, everyone. Thank you for staying with us. We're here with Jim Settley, who is the Executive Director of UMaine School of Policy and International Relations. So thank you for being with us again. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Two Fridays in a row. I think we're starting to make it a habit.
It is a little bit. But I did want to talk to you. We now know the results of the election. They came fairly quickly. And so now we have now former President Trump is now President-elect Trump. And I wanted to talk about how his cabinet is taking shape, because we're already seeing a lot of names thrown out there. Of course, he's already named as Chief of Staff, but in terms of Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, we're seeing familiar names. We're seeing Florida Senator Marco Rubio thrown in the ring as a potential for Secretary of State. And then Mike Pompeo, also a familiar name, and formerly served under President Trump, also now in the running for Secretary of Defense. So when you're hearing names thrown out about these potential cabinet positions, what's going through your mind with the potentials here?
Well, when we talked last Friday, we talked about what the potential was under each of the two candidates. And so here we now have a president-elect. And one of the things we said last Friday was that he'll bring in a completely different group, not only from what President Biden had, but a completely different group from what he had in 2016. He's learned an awful lot in the last 8 years. And so we also talked about his foreign policy and the impact on economic policy and immigration policy. And the foreign policy that he's going to have is really going to be driven by his Secretary of State and his Secretary of Defense. I think the two most critical cabinet positions. So watching those two positions will determine whether there's support for Ukraine, whether there's going to be some kind of get-together with Benjamin Netanyahu, whether he supports Israel, whether they support. So this next set of cabinet positions, starting with the Secretary of Defense, is absolutely going to drive all of that foreign policy. And Mike Pompeo is obviously is the name that we've heard the most. There's a couple, three other names out there, but that's the one. And interestingly enough, Pompeo, former Secretary of State Pompeo, is a Ukraine supporter.
Right.
So we see that during the election, in the Ukraine, is worried about where Trump's going to go with his support. And there's a lot of concern that he's going to pull support and put more emphasis on the European Union to support that war. And here comes in Pompeo. If he is named the Secretary of Defense, then you are likely to see a continuation of U.S. support for the Ukraine, which is not something we heard about during the election cycle.
Yeah, and what's is interesting but not surprising is that the election results were probably not even 24 hours old, and now it's reported that there had been a call as of Wednesday with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Trump, and Elon Musk reportedly on that phone call as well. So what do you make of that, and then also just lending additional urgency to the fact that the results are 24 hours old and there's already a call with Zelensky?
Well, two different questions there. The first one is in 2016 when Trump won, he was so surprised. He had no transition team. He had not a real significant idea on who he was going to put into his cabinet. Completely different this time. In 2024, he has an idea of who he wants to name, who he wants to surround himself, the loyalists he wants to put into positions. So he's looking at things a little bit differently. The calls that he's getting are, one, from people that are interested in serving in his administration, but two, those leaders around the world who are understanding, and they know differently how to work with Trump this time, understanding how to work with President Trump. Reap praise on him, talk nicely. Transactional leadership is his style. So Zelensky calls him right away, and Zelensky met with him when he came here during his last visit to the United States. So that's really important. The interesting thing about Elon Musk, which is a little bit of a different issue, is the advisors that he's surrounding himself with. There is some significant concern, not only in the United States, but around the world, that he's going to surround himself more with loyalists than he did before. Jim Mattis was the Secretary of Defense, incredible check and balance, and moving our foreign policy in a way that was beneficial to the world and to the American people. This time, I'm not sure that's going to happen. He's going to surround himself with some different people, and those advisors like Elon Musk and a couple of others are really going to have an impact on how we move forward, in our foreign policy world.
All right. Well, there is so much to keep an eye on moving forward. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you again for coming in and lending your time and your perspective. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everybody, stay with us. Your updated and extended forecast is coming.